Amidst the gray downpour of New York, Ethan Knight, the cold, billionaire CEO, stepped out of his luxurious limousine, only to find two orphaned little girls standing at the gate of his company. Their eyes were filled with tears as they cried out, "Uncle, you're Uncle Ethan, right?" In that moment, the cold, calculated world that Ethan had built seemed to tremble and shift. Ethan Knight had once been a symbol of success. He was the CEO of one of the largest companies in America, a man who never allowed emotions to cloud his judgment. At 38, Ethan had everything: vast wealth, a powerful team, and a solid reputation in the business world. Each morning, he didn't have to think much about life. He had achieved everything he wanted. Yet, deep within his heart, there was a strange emptiness. For Ethan, family no longer held any significance. He had long severed ties with his parents after their divorce. And Lily, the sister he once adored, had become nothing more than a distant memory. After a heated argument with Lily many years ago, Ethan had rejected all communication from his family. He told himself that he didn't need those relationships. He had money, power, and a successful career. Those things made him feel valuable, and the world recognized that value. However, in the stillness of the morning, Ethan would occasionally wonder if he was missing something more important than all of that. At times, while sitting in his lavish office, a strange loneliness would creep in. He had everything, but there was one thing missing: love, family, and connection. That day, the rain poured down in torrents from the gray sky, and the wind howled, causing yellow leaves to scatter across the street in front of Ethan's office. While others rushed to meet deadlines, Ethan remained immersed in his work, as he did every other day. Endless meetings, financial reports, and difficult decisions awaited him. But then, as he sat in his office, a call from the security guard abruptly interrupted the silence. They said two little girls were standing outside in the pouring rain, refusing to leave until they met with CEO Ethan Knight. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, unable to believe what he was hearing. Who were these children? What were they doing here? Ethan's assistant quickly explained that the guards had tried to persuade them to leave, but they refused. They insisted they needed to meet Uncle Ethan. That was when Ethan felt a strange unease rise in his chest. He had no idea why two children would be outside his company's gate in such weather. It must be a prank, Ethan told himself, and instructed the guards to let them in. He never imagined this meeting would change everything. As the door swung open, Ethan stepped outside with his usual calm, confident stride. But this time, everything was different. Before him stood two little girls, about 7 years old, drenched from the rain, their faces smudged with dirt, but their eyes shone with brightness. They rushed towards him, without hesitation, and wrapped their arms tightly around his legs. One of the girls looked up at him and whispered, "Uncle Ethan, you're our uncle, right?" Ethan froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. Both girls gazed at him with such sincerity, as if there was no doubt in their minds. One of them pulled out an old photograph, a picture of a younger Ethan standing next to a woman. It was a photo that Ethan couldn't remember, but recognized instantly. It was a photo of him from his younger days, taken with Lily, the sister he hadn't seen in years. The girls handed the photo to Ethan, calling him uncle. The words echoed in the air, and Ethan's mind began to spiral into confusion. He looked into the innocent eyes of the two girls and felt something strange stir within him, a feeling as though he had been forgotten for so long. Ethan stood there, silent, unable to do anything but stare at the two girls before him. He couldn't understand what was going on. How do they know me? Ethan wondered. I've never met them. Why are they calling me uncle? Questions swirled in his mind, but there were no answers. The old photograph, these two little girls, where had they come from? Ethan had always been very careful with his personal information, rarely letting anything slip. How did these girls know him? The feeling of confusion and disorientation overwhelmed him. His assistant stood nearby, looking concerned, but Ethan just shook his head. He couldn't ignore these children, yet he also felt trapped in an odd situation with no way out. Part of him wanted to dismiss it and return to work, but another part of him couldn't leave, couldn't ignore the look in their eyes. The assistant quietly advised Ethan to disregard this as some sort of misunderstanding, but Ethan couldn't shake the strange sensation. It was as though a feeling, long dormant within him, had suddenly awakened. He looked at the two girls and saw the pleading in their eyes. Everything in his company seemed to fade away, replaced by a very different feeling. A feeling Ethan had never experienced before. He couldn't simply walk away and return to his work. He couldn't just ignore them as if they were strangers. For the first time in years, Ethan felt that something was changing within him. A small crack appeared, even though he didn't know exactly what was happening. He gazed at the two girls, and in that moment, his heart seemed to quiet. Could this be a sign he had missed long ago? After a long day, Ethan returned to his apartment, where everything was perfectly arranged, but inside, he couldn't find peace. He sat alone in the dark, looking at the old photo the two girls had given him. The photo brought back old memories, a time when he was young, about his family, and of Lily, the sister he had abandoned for his career. The scene replayed in his mind as though it had just happened, the night Lily and he had argued fiercely, the night he decided to cut all ties. After that night, Lily disappeared from his life, and Ethan never looked back. Now, with the photo in his hands, Ethan couldn't avoid the regret. He realized that perhaps he had been the one to hurt his family. Could he ever fix the mistakes of the past? Could he ever find the love he had lost? These questions pounded in his mind, but there were no answers. The feeling of regret and sorrow engulfed his soul as the night wore on. Right after the strange encounter with the two girls, Ethan felt himself drawn into a maze with no way out. While work still awaited him, the confusion in his heart grew stronger. Who were these girls? How did they know him? And most importantly, why did they call him uncle? To find the answers, Ethan decided he couldn't just stand by, he had to know the truth. He hired a private investigation team, asking them to investigate the two girls and any connections between them and him. Over the following days, reports slowly came in. Then, one morning, as he held the detailed report from the investigation team, Ethan felt paralyzed. It turned out that these two girls were the children of Lily, his sister whom he hadn't seen in years. This revelation hit him like a sudden shock, as if everything in his life had just been turned upside down. The vague memories from the past, the empty spaces in his life, now seemed to be uncovered, revealing painful truths. Lily was his only sister, someone he had once been very close to, but now, everything about her was just fragments of memory. Ethan couldn't understand how he had ignored all of this, how he had been able to cut off his family for so many years. He felt an immense guilt, as if he had lost his way in his own life. These children he had never met, had now become part of a story he had unknowingly overlooked. As Ethan sat back and reflected on what had just happened, childhood memories suddenly flooded back like an unstoppable river. He remembered the days when his parents were still living together, when his family was filled with laughter. But everything changed when his parents decided to divorce. In the afternoons, he and Lily would sit together, watching the leaves fall outside the window, but then the arguments between their parents grew more intense. Ethan couldn't stand the tension in the house, feeling like he no longer had a place there. He ran away, looking for a way to escape that painful life. Gradually, he found himself in his work, in meetings, and big contracts. The feeling of achieving success and having power made him forget about things that seemed unimportant: family, love, and connection. Meanwhile, Lily, his sister, chose a different path. She didn't chase fame, didn't seek success like him. Lily just wanted a family, a peaceful home. But then she disappeared, and Ethan never made an effort to reconnect with her. The years passed, and Lily was no longer part of Ethan's life. He only saw her shadow through old photos, through faint memories. But now, knowing that these children were Lily's, all those memories came rushing back, strong and haunting. He couldn't stop thinking about his choices and the indifference he had shown to his family over the years. Just as Ethan was lost in his thoughts, his lawyer called. In the call, the lawyer delivered news that made him feel like he was crumbling. "Lily has passed away." Those words rang in Ethan's head, making him unable to believe his ears. Lily was gone. So, she was really no longer here. His heart tightened. But that wasn't all. The lawyer continued, explaining that Lily had died in a tragic car accident while returning from a business trip. There was no chance to save her. But even more painful was the story behind her death. Lily's husband had passed away when the children were still very young, and Lily had to raise them on her own. No one knew how hard she had struggled. And when Lily passed away, the two children became orphans, with no one to adopt them, no one to care for them. Ethan felt like a knife had pierced his heart. He had missed the chance to be there for his sister, to help her when she needed him the most. These children had endured so much pain that he had no idea about. They had grown up in loneliness, with no family, no protection. The guilt and regret tightened Ethan's heart. He had let his life become a series of wrong decisions. When the call ended, Ethan just stood there, holding the phone. His mind completely lost. Everything in front of him seemed to fade away. He couldn't understand why he had missed all of this. Why hadn't he realized that his sister had been struggling alone, exhausted and worn out all these years? Why hadn't he tried to help her? That question kept repeating in his mind, but there were no answers. He remembered the days when Lily had been by his side, when they laughed together, shared dreams. But then, he had chosen his own path and left her behind. Now, knowing the truth about Lily's death, Ethan was overwhelmed with an incredible sense of loss. He couldn't believe he had lost his sister without even realizing it. The guilt was inescapable. He had done nothing to help her. And now it was too late. Despite the overwhelming regret in Ethan's heart, the two girls still seemed incredibly happy to have found their uncle. They smiled and happily shared stories about their mother, about the mother who had always talked about Uncle Ethan as a role model they had always hoped to meet. "Mom always said you were very successful, and one day we would meet you," one of the girls said, her eyes full of hope. Ethan listened, his heart aching. Although the girls didn't know anything about his relationship with their mother, in their eyes, he was a wonderful man, a role model they admired. Those words only intensified the pain in Ethan's heart. How had their mother, Lily, spoken of him? Had she hidden all the pain and hardship over the years just to protect her children? Could he become a part of their lives now, and could he fix the mistakes he had made? As Ethan looked at the two girls, the innocent children still smiling at him, he began to realize an uncomfortable truth. All that he had achieved over the years, wealth, fame, power, was it really worth it? He had spent his whole life chasing success, proving that he could stand strong on his own. But now, looking into the innocent eyes of these children, he felt like he had lost the most precious thing in his life: family, love, and connection. What he had achieved might have made him stand out, but could it bring him true happiness? Had he been wrong not to stop and reassess the real values in life? For the first time in his life, Ethan wondered if all those successes could ever fill the void in his soul. With his mind still weighed down by unresolved memories, Ethan decided to bring the two little girls to live in his mansion, at least for a few days. He thought he would take care of them temporarily, find a way to give them a more stable home, and then try to send them to another family. He never imagined that he could keep them long-term or that they would change his life forever. Ethan's mansion was vast, and he felt somewhat strange having strangers live with him. It was a quiet place, a cold space of success, but also a place devoid of affection. However, when the two girls walked in, the atmosphere in the house suddenly changed. The sound of their laughter brightened everything. At first, Ethan didn't know what to do with them. These children had never had a real family, and he wasn't sure he could be a father, or even an uncle, to them. But when he looked into their innocent, bright eyes, he couldn't leave them alone. Deep down, he knew that, at least for now, he could do something to bring them a little peace. Not long after settling in, the two girls began to adapt to their new life in Ethan's mansion. However, what surprised Ethan was that they didn't just enjoy playing, they also dragged him into every daily activity. One morning, as he was preparing for work, the two girls ran into the kitchen and demanded that he learn to cook with them. "Uncle Ethan, today we want to bake. Please help us." A simple request, but it made Ethan feel as though he was being pulled into an entirely different world. Until then, Ethan had always considered the kitchen a place for women in the family. Not for men like him who were focused only on work and career. However, when he saw the bright, shining eyes of the two girls, he couldn't refuse. And so, he began learning how to cook. Laughter echoed throughout the large kitchen. Gradually, he no longer saw cooking as a boring household chore, but rather as an opportunity to connect with these children. After the cooking sessions, they would sit together, tell their favorite fairy tales, and play simple, joyful games. What seemed like trivial moments turned into precious memories Ethan had never experienced. It was the first time he felt a connection, the warmth he had missed for so long. Before, Ethan never laughed. He didn't believe in simple happiness or close bonds. His life had revolved around power, success, and career. He didn't have time for family emotions, and those feelings seemed distant to him. However, being with the two girls, he began to sense a change. Their laughter wasn't just sound, but rays of light that dispelled the darkness in his soul. That day, as he was trying to cook a new dish with the girls, everything seemed to go wrong. Flour spilled everywhere, the pan was too hot, and the cake burned. But it was at that moment that he laughed, a real laugh for the first time in many years. It wasn't a laugh out of joy or comfort, but a laugh because he felt freedom in his emotions, connection, and simple joy. That feeling had never appeared in his life before. But now, looking into the faces of the two girls, he began to understand that some joys in life don't require wealth or success. All you need is love, family, and simple moments. One afternoon, when everything became still, Ethan felt a powerful wave surge within him. He sat in his office, but couldn't focus on work. He thought about Lily, his sister whom he had abandoned for so many years. Somehow, he found some old letters of hers in a drawer. Handwritten letters, messages he had never responded to. Lily had tried to reach out to him, but all she got from him was silence. He flipped through the letters, reading the words she had written in tears, telling him about her life, the struggles she faced, but he had never cared. Each letter was a call for help, a plea for his presence, but he ignored it all. A wave of guilt rose within him, like a huge wave crashing into his heart. He felt his heart tighten with regret for the years of indifference, for the opportunities he had missed. These letters weren't just messages from the past, they were reproaches from himself, from someone who didn't understand the importance of family. Every line in Lily's letters made Ethan's heart ache more. Her words weren't accusations, but heartfelt pleas, desires for connection. She just wanted him to understand, to be there for her in her times of difficulty. But instead of being there, he ran after fame, seeking recognition from society, while she and the family needed him most. These words were an indelible reminder, a truth he could no longer escape. Ethan felt as if he were standing in front of a mirror, seeing a completely different man, one he didn't even recognize. He had spent his entire life chasing after trivial things, but now, what truly mattered stood before him in the form of 2 orphan children and a lost sister. He couldn't go back, couldn't change the past, but he could start anew right now. Day by day, Ethan began to feel a significant change within himself. He was no longer the cold CEO who always put work first. He started to see himself in a new role, as an uncle, someone the 2 girls could rely on, someone who could offer them love and protection. The hours spent together, playing games, cooking, and telling stories helped him realize what was most important in his life. These children didn't need a CEO, they didn't need a rich man. They needed a family, an uncle who truly loved them. And gradually, Ethan found himself again. He was no longer the lonely man chasing success. He had become a pillar, a home, where love and connection were the things that mattered most. One day, as Ethan was preparing for an important meeting, his lawyer suddenly called. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about adopting the 2 girls." The lawyer's voice was serious. Ethan felt a bit anxious, but couldn't explain why, as he had already sensed a change in himself, a change he couldn't quite put into words. The lawyer began to explain, "To officially adopt the 2 girls, you'll need to prove that you can be a qualified guardian. This isn't just about signing paperwork. It's also about changing your lifestyle." Ethan remained silent, his heart tightening. He was used to his busy life, with long workdays and evenings with no time for himself. He never imagined that becoming a father or even an uncle would require such significant changes. The lawyer reminded him that if he wanted to raise the 2 girls, he would need to cut back on work and create a stable, safe environment for them. A sense of worry rose in Ethan's chest because this was the first time he had faced such a big decision. The next day, Ethan received a call from the company's board of directors. Everything around him, from his work to his family, seemed to be affected by the decision he had to make. The directors were concerned that if Ethan spent too much time caring for the 2 girls, it would affect the company. One of the directors, Mr. Martin, said seriously, "Ethan, we understand you're facing difficult circumstances, but you're the CEO of this company. If you can't maintain work performance, the company won't be able to succeed." These words hit Ethan like a bucket of cold water. He had always treated the company like his child, but now, the company was threatening the family bond he had just begun to build. Ethan had spent many years alone, with no one to care for, and he let his work consume all his time. Now, with 2 children needing him, he had to face a painful truth: as a CEO, he couldn't separate work from family. But when he thought about the 2 girls, he couldn't abandon them. He couldn't let them grow up without true care and love. Ethan's longtime friends, who had accompanied him in work and life, began to show concern. They advised him that adopting the 2 girls was not an easy decision. "Ethan, we all understand the situation, but don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. You could find a good family to send them to, at least that would be better for everyone." One of his longtime partners, who always prioritized career, also advised him to consider carefully. "You're a successful CEO, Ethan. If you can't make time for the company, it will be hard to maintain your job, not to mention dealing with family responsibilities." These words were a challenge, a doubt that Ethan had never faced before. His friends and partners saw him as a man who had achieved success in his career, but could they see the deep love and transformation growing within him? Ethan knew that if he followed their advice, his life would return to the way it was, cold and lonely. But if he followed his heart, he would face a life full of challenges, yet also filled with meaning. One evening, after a long day of work and worrying about his decision, Ethan sat down in a chair and looked at the 2 girls sleeping in their room. The sight warmed his heart. The 2 children lay comfortably in his embrace, their breathing steady and peaceful. Every time he looked at them sleeping soundly, he felt a happiness he had never known before. This feeling wasn't something he could get from work or success; it was peace in his heart, the connection he had been seeking for all these years. These children had changed him, made him realize that love and family were the most important things in life. Ethan realized he couldn't leave them. He couldn't continue living a cold and lonely life just for personal ambition. The love of these children was the only reason he decided to change his life. He couldn't let them suffer a life without love, without the care of an uncle, a true father. Ethan stood at a crossroads, one path leading to ambition, career, and the life he had built for so long, the other path leading to love, family, and the responsibilities he was beginning to understand. He had lived his life to achieve success, to become a strong man, a CEO admired by many. But now, these children had opened a new door for him, a new life. A life not only of wealth and fame but also of love, connection, and simple moments. He knew that if he continued living for ambition, he would lose the most important values in his life. But if he chose love, if he chose family, his life would become more complete than ever before. He felt he was standing before a great decision, a decision that would not only change his life but also affect the people around him. After nights of contemplation and mornings full of worry, Ethan made his decision. He would no longer let concerns about work or career influence his decision. He would adopt the 2 girls. This decision wasn't easy, and he knew it would change everything. He would have to sacrifice long workdays, sacrifice part of his career, but he understood that this was the right decision. He couldn't leave them, he couldn't let them grow up without love. He would be the uncle they needed, the family they had been looking for. No matter what he had to give up, he would do everything to ensure these children would never suffer again. Ethan knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to begin a new journey, a journey of love and responsibility. When Ethan decided to adopt 2 young girls, he knew that not only would his personal life change, but the world around him would never be the same. He had to face many anxieties and a sense of insecurity regarding society's reactions. But he understood that if he wanted to be a role model for the girls, he had to stand firm and accept every challenge. One morning, as he sat in front of his computer, looking at a photo of the two girls playing outside in the garden, his heart suddenly became resolute. He decided to publicly announce his decision to adopt the girls to the press. He no longer wanted to hide this, no longer wanted to live in the shadows of the choices he had made in the past. Immediately, news of Ethan's decision spread, and public opinion began to stir. Some praised him as a hero, while others criticized him, claiming he was losing the image of a powerful CEO. But Ethan felt nothing but happiness as he watched the two girls contentedly in his arms. He had decided to follow his heart, and nothing was more important than becoming a real father, a protector to the children who needed him. Just days after his adoption announcement, Ethan started receiving unexpected calls from the company's shareholders. One of the largest shareholders, Mr. Richard, called Ethan directly and bluntly said, "Ethan, you've gone too far. We understand you have new responsibilities, but can you still run the company as before? If you can't focus on work, we'll have to find another CEO." These words were a shock to Ethan. He was used to facing difficulties at work, but this was different. He had to choose between maintaining power or diving into a family life he never imagined he would have. Ethan knew it wasn't easy to change the perception of the shareholders, but he also understood that the changes in his life were necessary. He couldn't keep living for work, couldn't keep sacrificing family for personal ambition. He needed to find a way to balance, to build a future that didn't just include the company, but also the values that truly mattered in life. Ethan began to realize that in order to be a good father and a model uncle, he had to change his work schedule. Long meetings, packed business trips were no longer his priorities. He started delegating company management to the deputy CEO, whom he had trusted for years, so he could spend more time with his family. He no longer wanted to live with a busy schedule. He didn't want to just be a CEO with numbers and reports. Instead, every morning, he began waking up earlier to take the girls to school, attend parent meetings, and listen to their stories. These small things, which he had never thought about before, now brought him joy and a sense of purpose in life. He noticed that, despite needing to make many changes, every moment with the girls was the greatest reward he could have. The lessons he learned didn't just come from work or business but from the simple situations in daily life. He no longer felt lonely at work. Instead, he had found happiness in every family moment. One morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual, looked at the clock, and realized that he didn't need to rush to a meeting immediately. Instead of hurrying to get into his car and head to the office, he prepared breakfast for the girls and drove them to school. For the first time in many years, Ethan felt a peace in spending time with his family rather than racing with work. At school, he participated in the Parent-Teacher Day, where he wasn't just a cold CEO but a father taking care of his children. He listened as teachers shared the girls' progress, and he exchanged stories with other parents about family life. He began to realize that life wasn't just about work, there were precious moments with loved ones. When the girls shared their innocent stories with him, he laughed heartily, feeling happier than ever. Those moments made him realize he had found a part of life that he had missed during all those years dedicated to his career. People around Ethan, from his colleagues to business partners, began to notice the noticeable change in him. Before, Ethan had always been distant, stern, and sometimes aloof. He rarely smiled, and seldom shared his feelings with others. But now, a new Ethan Knight had emerged. He was still sharp and decisive in business, but he became warmer, smiled more, and showed interest in those around him. Partners started seeing him engage in conversation sincerely, sharing his emotions and opinions on matters not just related to work but also to life. His colleagues at the company also realized that the CEO they had once admired had now become someone who could empathize, share, and make humanistic decisions. Ethan was no longer just a CEO with endless responsibilities, he had become a man with a warm heart, someone who could love and sacrifice for the people around him. At the end of the day, sitting alone, watching the children happily playing, Ethan felt a peace he had never known before. He realized that although he had sacrificed many things to have his current life, he hadn't lost anything at all. He had only just begun to find the true meaning of life. Before, he lived for work, for fame, but now he understood that true happiness didn't lie in numbers or important meetings. True happiness was found in simple moments with family, in the love he had rediscovered. He no longer felt lonely, no longer felt that he was lacking anything. He had found what he never thought he needed, a family, love, and a meaningful life. Ethan knew that, though the road ahead would never be easy, at least he had found the most important thing he had ever sought, love and connection. Many years after adopting the two girls, Ethan had completely changed. He was no longer the cold, ambitious man who lived only for himself as he once was. Instead, he had become a man who knew how to love and care, a father, an uncle, and a solid pillar for his family. Every morning, instead of diving into work with a series of meetings and tense negotiations, he found joy in taking the girls to school, preparing breakfast for the family, and chatting about the little things of the day. He no longer felt an emptiness in life because he now understood what love and sacrifice meant. Ethan was not only a successful billionaire but also a father his girls could be proud of, and an uncle cherished by his family. Even though the company continued to thrive, he no longer saw that as the most important thing. The moments spent with his family were what truly made him happy. Looking back, he realized that it wasn't wealth or fame that had made him a better person, but love. The two girls, the children Ethan once feared he couldn't take care of, had now grown into healthy, intelligent, and happy young women. They had taken the Knight surname, the name of the father they had never met but always believed they would one day find. They had grown up under Ethan's love, and from orphan children, they had become the pride of the family. While life had not always been easy, with Ethan's love and guidance, the girls had overcome every difficulty. They became the light that guided him, a source of endless encouragement for him to keep moving forward. Every day, Ethan asked himself whether, without these two girls, he would have found these truly meaningful moments in life. The girls, with their innocent questions and bright smiles, had made him realize that life was not just about work, but also about family, love, and values that couldn't be measured by money. Though the world outside changed, the love of family was the one thing that would never change. With everything he had gone through, Ethan understood that success was not the final destination in life. He began searching for ways to make up for the lost years, the opportunities he had missed. He decided to start a charity named after his late sister, Lily, who had passed away long ago. This charity wasn't just a way to help orphan children, but also a way for Ethan to make amends for the mistakes of his past. He wanted to use what he had to change the lives of children without families, children he had once ignored in his pursuit of personal ambition. Each year, Ethan's charity helped thousands of children, providing them with education, care, and love. And when he saw the smiles of those children, Ethan felt that he had found a part of the meaning of life. He was no longer just a CEO or a billionaire, he had become someone responsible, a leader in society, and most importantly, someone who gave without expecting anything in return. The day that Ethan's two girls walked across the stage to receive their diplomas was a moment he would never forget. Ethan stood there, in the crowd, watching his two children, whom he had loved and cared for since they were very young. He remembered the tough days when he had decided to change his life, when he had to face the criticism and doubt of those around him. But today, standing on that stage, with their diplomas in hand, his girls had proved that all the sacrifices, all the decisions he had made, were worth it. Tears rolled down Ethan's cheeks, not because of sadness, but because of an indescribable happiness. He had done right. Every step, every decision, no matter how hard, had led him to this moment when he saw his daughters grow strong, hopeful, and mature. He no longer felt alone or regretful, he only felt faith in what he had done. After years of relentless work, after having achieved everything one could dream of, Ethan finally realized the most important thing: money and power would eventually fade. These things, though valuable for a short time, couldn't last forever. But family love, that was eternal. He looked at his children, at his wife, and realized that his life was no longer just about meetings or numbers. With each passing day, he grew to cherish the moments with his family, the ones he knew he never wanted to lose. Every morning when he woke up, he felt like the happiest person alive, for not only did he have success, but he also had the priceless love of his family. He understood that everything else was fleeting, only love and family were eternal, the only things he could carry with him for the rest of his life. In the end, Ethan's story did not end with a victory or success in business, but with a simple yet complete moment. Three people, Ethan and his two girls, holding hands on the beach at sunset. The golden light of the setting sun painted the sky, and the sea gently whispered beside them. For the first time in many years, Ethan smiled, and this time, his smile no longer carried loneliness or fatigue. He felt the love and connection that he had never experienced in all those previous years. In that moment, he didn't need to say anything. Just a handhold, a hug, was enough to make him realize that this life, no matter how many challenges it held, would eventually bring moments of happiness and meaning. And with each step, Ethan knew he had found the most precious thing in life: family love, and peace within his soul.